You're listening to episode 87, Lisa and Brady's story. A mom and son discuss their past cancer experience. Hello, my friends. Okay, I know I say this every single time, but you guys, I cannot wait for you to hear this interview that I was able to do. So I connected with Brady, and Brady is such an impressive young man. I mean, he's not young anymore. He's 25. He's a full-blown adult. And the reason we connected is we both went to Penn State. And I don't think I've shared this on the podcast before, but I went to the Pennsylvania State University in University Park, PA. Go Lions. And one of the parts about Penn State that is so incredible, one of the many, many things, is that we have the largest student-run philanthropy in the world. So it's called Thon. You've probably heard of it before. Other universities have done dance marathons, and that's amazing. Good for you guys. But nothing matches Thon. And so Thon raises money for Hershey Medical Center, and I mean, millions and millions of dollars every single year. And this started out by canning, which is where students from Penn State would go and stand on the side of the road and hold cans and collect money. And so it was a huge part of my life at Penn State. And Hershey Medical Center is the first place I met a child life specialist, and I was volunteering at the hospital, and I looked at her and I said, you are who I want to be. So long story short, this is not about me. This is about Brady. I got connected with Brady because he works for the Four Diamonds Fund, which is the recipient of the money that Thon goes to. And he himself has dealt with cancer, not once, but twice. And he agreed to come on the podcast with his mom. So this is an episode where I get to talk to both of them about what Brady remembers, what Lisa remembers, how their experiences are similar, how they're different. And I'm so honored to have them here today. And for Childhood Cancer Awareness Month and continuing to spread awareness about this really, really scary, terrible disease. So without further ado, here's my very new forced friend, Brady. We're friends now. And his mom, who I'm also going to be friends with now, Lisa. So, Lisa, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and your family to everyone who's listening and tell us a bit about your story.
Okay. My name is Lisa Ernie. I am the mother of Brady Lucas. I'm proud mother of Brady Lucas. He has an older brother, Ryan Lucas, and a younger brother, Sean Lucas. And his stepfather I am married to now is Colin Ernie. His father is Tom, still very involved with lives, with each other's lives. I would say that's the one thing that no matter what, the family all pulls together for Brady, no matter what the circumstances were like in that situation.
It sounds like you've got a lot of people who love you, Brady.
Oh, of course. I'm very grateful and fortunate.
So, Lisa, why don't you take us back to kind of the beginning when you learned that something was going on with Brady?
We will go back. Oh my goodness. And it was, April of 2005. It seems like such a lifetime, more, I would say several lifetimes ago. Mm-hmm. In doing the questions to get prepared for this, to relive that was something that we don't often take the consciousness to do. But thinking back, it was one of those things that the boys will be boys, and Brady's older brother and he were playing downstairs in their father's basement, and they were playing with a little basketball hoop. And the next thing, I guess, apparently his brother lifted over him and knocked him on the ground. He hit his face on the ceramic tile, to my understanding. And so after that happened, took him to the doctor. His face had started swelling just a little bit. And so then it was like, we took him to the doctor just to get checked. And the doctor's like, well, just watch for a concussion, don't worry about it. Just, try to take care of it and watch for signs of concussion. So we didn't think too much more about it. But then the next thing, Brady, who loves school, would go to school and he'd come home and he'd be crying with horrible headaches. And I was like, okay, so I took him back to the doctor again. And again, they were just like, oh, well, okay, that could be from him banging his head. Well, the swelling in his face didn't go down. The headaches didn't go away. So then I was calling the doctor again because now he started to have fevers. So the doctor was like, well, okay, they took him and they looked at him again, and they still couldn't actually pinpoint anything that was wrong. So we still continued sending Brady to school, still continued trying to get through this. And the next thing then, like, he started to get fevers. Meanwhile, I had taken him to the doctor. This is probably the fourth or fifth time now. And the doctor, I finally called on a Monday when he came home again with a headache. And she said, oh, we don't do revisits on Monday. And I was like, okay, but yes, you will. Because at that point I got furious. I said, he is not a revisit. He has all these symptoms and you're not looking at him. And I will be there in 10 minutes. And we went. And the thing is, this is the one thing I would tell any of your listeners. You must be an advocate for your child's health. Because if I would have just sat back and not paid attention to what I knew as my child and my child's health and my child, what he normally is like versus what he was like leading up into his diagnosis, I would have been very negligent. We ended up getting a strep test done that day. He actually tested positive for strep. So then it was kind of like, oh, okay, phew, okay, he has strep. Mm-hmm. And just kind of left that go but they sent us to the ENT the next day, and an appointment with the ENT. They said, oh, just to make sure that he doesn't have mono or something else, because he was getting very tired and listless, which Brady is not tired or listless. He's very active, even back at 8 years old, saying very active. So we went into the ENT the next day, and I think she knew what was wrong because she saw him and she ordered a full blood panel instead of just looking for the strep, instead of looking for the mono. But she explained to us that, oh, we're looking for other things, not setting off any, bells or whistles or anything at that time. But I think she knew because just from looking at him, because again, his face was a little swollen. He had these other tests come back. But then they did the blood panel. And so expecting, okay, he has strep, he has mono, antibiotics, whatever, and then it'll be all better. So she said she'd call me in the morning with the results. And I said, okay. So the next morning, actually, I can remember it distinctly because he actually stayed home from school the next day. And it was 10:03. And I remember exactly when she called. It was 10:03 on the clock. And I answered the phone and she said, this is Dr. St. George. And I said, okay. I said, just still expecting her to say, okay, we'll get him for antibiotics. We'll take him, get him all fixed up. And then the world stopped. She said, all right. She said, I have some news for you. She said, Brady actually has leukemia. And right away, I was like, oh my gosh. I said, how much time does he have? And she goes, oh, no. It's not like that anymore. She goes, you need to take him to Hershey or Johns Hopkins and they'll do further testing. And after they do further testing, we can determine what type it is and a plan of action for him. Never expecting that. I mean, it's not something when your child turns 8 years old, you think, okay, you have them eat healthy. Brady ate healthy. Brady was outside playing all the time. He wasn't one of those kids that was inside. I mean, all of these things that you do to have your child healthy and be healthy and stay healthy. And all of a sudden your child has cancer. And that seriously was one of the biggest, it was just such a moment that when they say that time stopped. And you just feel helpless. And as a mom, that is one of the worst things in the world because the helplessness, you want to fix everything for your child and you want to make everything better. And in this case, that you couldn't do anything any longer.
Wow. I once had a mom tell me, she said, it feels like your parental rights are just stripped away. Like you can no longer do the things you thought you were meant to do for your child because you don't have the experience or knowledge or medical background to do it. And it feels incredibly crippling.
It is. And I would agree with that in the point that a mom is the one who's there to make things better and take care of everything. And you just feel like you're so helpless and you're just so grounded. And, some people had coming back to that. Some people were just like, she told you on the phone. I'm like, well, and there's a whole series of things that people like Brady and I had talked about, people not quite understanding. And I said, well, what was she going to do?
Yeah.
Have me come into there to tell me that. And, so it was just, and I didn't want to say it, like I couldn't, associate leukemia with cancer, and leukemia sounded better than cancer did, which that sounds really stupid, but
Not at all.
leukemia was a better word than cancer. But right away we got together and had taken him to the medical center then the next day to get tested and things. So, but I don't know. There's this story leading up to like after we got him there and everything that we took him up. We had to get all the tests done. We had to get all the blood work done, and it was just a whirlwind. And the one thing when you go into Hershey Medical Center, it was just like we're coming from a world of 3 boys and baseball and basketball and games and kids. And, the house was overrun with children all the time and just, quote unquote, a normal family life. And all of a sudden the world stops. And it's just like everybody else's world kept going, but our world just completely stopped. And all of a sudden you have a child who you're taking into the Hershey Medical Center, and you look around and seriously, I thought, oh, okay, he's going to be the only one here. So we walk in and all of a sudden you see hundreds of sick kids. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of sick children in the world.
Yeah. Brady, I'd love to kind of hear from you and what you were feeling as you're listening to your mom talk about this and what you remember about that time around the diagnosis.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think, to be completely honest, there's parts of that story that I'm finding out now that I never knew the lead up to it, to be completely honest, just because my mom's the type of person that never wanted to scare me and always wanted to be the individual that just was positive through everything and, the light that, through everything that I had to go through. But the one distinct thing I do remember from the diagnosis, the day that she found out, was I remember going into the kitchen of our house and my mom was like bawling her eyes out, and I couldn't, obviously, like at the time, she obviously was kind of just in shock to what was going on. And at that moment, I knew something A, wasn't right. And then B, as soon as I was told I was going to Hershey the next day, I knew something was a little more off. But me being the optimistic, positive person that I am, we were supposed to go to Texas the next day for NASCAR races. And I was like, all right, well, we're going to go here and then we're going to go to Texas and everything's going to be fine. And I'm going to go back to school and things like that. Well, little did I know, obviously, when I went into the hospital that I would be there for the next 23 days. So I would think it was kind of a moment of innocence, but also a moment of, I really did know a lot of what was going on. And I think that's a big thing too, is kids know a ton of what's going on. And if parents or, other people think they don't, they do. The big moment of that morning really was being told I had cancer. And the only thing I remember is walking outside and I asked if I was going to lose my hair. And that was the only association back then, and for many kids now, that I really understood with cancer is losing your hair and kind of going forward.
And I think going back to that particular day, just even going up there wanting to still maintain normalcy. I mean, we went up there and we're standing outside. We had to get all the testing and everything done. And we actually literally were taking him to Chocolate World, waiting for a bed. And we come outside and he's holding my hand, and just in pure mom form, he looked at me, and I still couldn't say cancer. So we come out and he looks up at me, and it was like this bright sunny day, and he looks up at me with this innocent little face, and he's just like, Mom, I have cancer. And so in true to mom form, I go, oh, just a little bit. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
okay. But that was my reaction. It's just like still softening it and still like, okay, just a little bit.
Just like, a little bit of cancer.
Just a little bit of cancer.
Meanwhile, my white blood cell count was at 91,000.
Yeah.
And
So
4.5 to 10.
and we didn't I said the funny thing with that, and we can laugh now, but I mean, you learn a lot about a lot that you don't really wish that you learned about. But it was just even trying to go to Chocolate World and maintaining that and going back and not even having the slightest idea what was going to happen the next days. And it was just like you're there and you feel like it's surreal. Like there's like someone carried you into a time zone and you just want to wake yourself up. Like you just want to pinch yourself and say, okay, this is done. Like, and then you realize that in no way, shape, or form is it a quick fix.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I have a question for both of you. I think you'll both have probably different answers, but so you go in and you mentioned that you were in for 23 days, but leukemia takes a really long time, right? It's a long treatment process. And so how did you see yourself? How did you handle the beginning of being in the hospital? And Brady, there's a lot of pain that comes with the beginning process of having to get really used to a lot of stuff really fast. How did you handle that kind of pain and discomfort? And Lisa, I want to know, how did you handle being the mom watching your son go through that?
I can go first. So to be completely honest, there's two things that I ever complained about during treatment. And one was peg asparaginase shots in my thighs. And the other was pentamidine. And the other things weren't a problem at all. You could have gave me a spinal tap. You could have gave me a bone marrow aspiration. You could have put as much chemo in me at all. But the two things were those two things. And I think, me looking back now, I didn't really understand the full thing. I just did what I knew I had to do to get through it. And we talk about this all the time, but our biggest thing was laughter and joy and just taking advantage of every situation that the hospital had to give us. And that sounds crazy, but like we would go to every activity in the playroom, whether it be I think it was 10 or 11 o'clock or the 2 p.m. one, and bingo every Thursday. So, this sounds crazy too, but there'd be times where if I was going to get admitted, I wanted to get admitted on a Thursday or a Wednesday night so then I could play bingo on Thursdays. It's just kind of the crazy things like that came upon it. But I mean, the prolonged thing, I don't think me as a young child really took it as much, as long. It was kind of like, I was going to a place where everyone knew me. Everybody was so welcoming at all times. It did suck a lot, like, kind of some of the different things that I had to go through. But at the mindset now, I almost look back at it at this point. My mom and I were talking about this today about different things. And, we didn't realize at the time how abnormal it was, the things that I was going through compared to other people.
And I think looking back at, like you were asking how you handle this and being in the hospital, one of the other things I think that was a huge struggle for me, and not at the time, because there was the reality that I had a son who I did not know if he was going to live or die in the next course of a week, a month. Like there was no way to determine that. And I think back to, I had 2 other children at the time. And I think that was what was super hard for me, is my whole life was into Brady at the time. And didn't find out till probably years later, the perspective of his brothers in this. And I'll never forget, Ryan is his older brother, and Ryan's 8th grade English teacher came to me one day and brought me, I was working at the school, and she actually brought me a paper, and she goes, I think you would like to read this. And it went the whole way through his his brother's perspective on what happened. And a lot of it was because Brady and Ryan had been playing. Ryan blamed himself. I mean, Ryan thought that he caused him to get the cancer. So, there's a lot of dynamics going on. And I think this was, we talked about this. This was it's definitely affects the family. But you don't take the time because you get so overwhelmed in taking care, being the caretaker for that particular child. But it's difficult to realize, okay, I have 2 other children here, and not knowing that his brother was suffering just as much because he was blaming himself for his brother getting sick. And in reality, saying to Ryan, you helped us find it. You didn't cause it. You helped us find it. And then you had a little brother who at the time, oh my goodness.
He was 4.
Oh, I can't even, he was 4. Yeah. And years down the road, it ends up being the unsung hero by being the bone marrow donor for his brother. I think as far as the at hand with pills and the blood work, Brady couldn't swallow pills when we first went. And, thinking down the road, how many hundreds of thousands of pills he probably ended up taking, and the blood work. And now for me, he never had to watch himself get a spinal tap or a bone aspiration. I watched only once. And for that, you watch it and you just pray the whole time, like you would do anything to take your child's place. Like I would have done anything to switch places with him. Luckily he didn't, it didn't seem to, he was one of those kids that was just like, oh yeah, I get anesthesia today and get to do this, but it was just like, oh my gosh, and you just had to kind of take that along with it. And, but you're watching people take the bone aspiration, which is about as thick as a big pen, and slamming all they can slam into your child's hip to get blood counts. Then you're watching spinal tap as your child lays on a table and they're dripping spinal fluid out of his, spinal cord, standing going, oh my God, and PICC lines going up to get so far in his arm. And then it's like, oh, that vein's not going to work, pulling it back out. And, there's a lot of things that as a mom, you just sit there and you pray the whole time, but there's no way in the world you're not going to be there. You're watching it, but it's almost like an out of body experience, the whole time. And, I think the biggest thing is we were so very blessed to have such a committed staff of people that were taking care of him. And we just had so much trust and faith in him, or in them, in taking care of him. And, I think that trust and that's the key, and just never thinking that he wasn't going to get better. It was all a means to an end. I would have people say, oh, blood transfusions, aren't you worried about blood transfusions? And I'm like, yes, but without them right now, he would die. Steroids, aren't you worried about the steroids? Without them, he would die. There weren't a lot of options there.
Right.
So it wasn't like they said, oh yes, you can give him all these poisons and chemo and medicine, or there were not
There's
options.
no or. Yeah.
As a child life specialist who has worked with hundreds of children and families over the past decade, I know that no 2 children are the same. That means I need access to tools that can easily adapt to whatever situation I'm in. SmileMakers has thousands of unique items that help me navigate every scenario, whether I'm looking for stickers and prizes for goodie bags for my patients or even my own kids, or I'm in child life specialist mode, working clinically to help a child cope with a medical procedure. I'm happy to support SmileMakers because they are a company who prioritizes the mental and emotional well-being of children by offering smiles on every page. Head to smilemakers.com when you're looking for a tool, toy, or prize to help a child smile. Use code ONCALL20 for 20% off your order of smile-making stickers, toys, patient supplies, and more.
looking back at how you handled going through treatment, what are some of the biggest takeaways that you think you learned about yourself and your relationship with your mom?
Yeah. So do you want me to talk about the first or second time?
Yeah. How about let's do it all. You choose.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm very fortunate that I'm very close to both my parents, my mom and my dad, and my siblings and all of my family, due to the fact that we stuck together through it all. And they were really the light of hope through everything. And I think what kind of grew us is, we spent hours upon hours in the hospital together, and it was just finding little things to make us laugh or cry. Like, for example, the one thing that I always go back to is we used to watch Austin Powers movies all the time. And for, and someone on the outside, they're looking at an Austin Powers movie, an 8-year-old and their mom watching an Austin Powers movie in the hospital. And I had no idea, the references that were going on in there. And my mom obviously knew, but it was kind of just like, I would sit there and laugh and laugh and laugh. And what's she supposed to do? Tell me no at that point.
Right.
We had so many memories like that, and just, different things, whether it was sneaking out in the middle of the night of the hospital and taking a walk around, or, some of the nurses would, when they wasn't busy, fortunately, we'd go in and out of rooms and use the nurse's call bell and call into each other and do all these other things that I think just made such the difference. And then, going the second time, I can walk you through a little bit of how we figured out the second time. And we knew from the second that I started to get sick that something wasn't up. And it was
How old were you at that time?
So I was 14 at the time.
Okay.
I just started my freshman year of high school. I just played my first varsity golf match as a freshman for a team that was very good. Like, our golf team was very good back in the day. So I was grateful to play in that. And I think that I can picture the moment vividly as I was on the 18th green. I got a 13 on the last hole because I hit the ball in the water like 3 or 4 times, hit the clubhouse 2 or 3 times, whatever. But I still have this picture that I'm just like sitting there smiling. And that was the last good day that I had before I got sick. So everybody else on the golf team was sick. And I'm thinking, how in the heck am I not sick? The rest of the team has perfect normal immune systems, and I have one that's half as normal. And, I jinxed myself because the next day I'm sitting in biology class, and I talk in the biology classes that I took that freshman year every year. And I tell this story, and it kind of makes me laugh, as I sat there and I was like, I really don't feel well today, and kind of just sat there and didn't really do too much. And, it was like an honors bio class. And then next day came, started to not feel that well. The Friday came and I popped a fever, and I was adamant to go to the football game. Like, Friday football games in high school for me and my brothers were everything. We dress up, we paint up, we do all these different things. And my mom wouldn't let me go. And I was furious at her for not letting me go to the football game. And obviously I couldn't go because I had a fever. And then Saturday came, Sunday came, and Sunday I had this very sharp pain in my shoulder. And we had our oncologist through text at that point, and, Barry was just like, reach out to us or me if you need anything. And we texted her and was like, come to Hershey, just get checked out. You might have pneumonia because, you've had pneumonia so many times in the past. And on that drive up, we definitely knew what was going to happen. We just didn't want to believe it to the full extent. We sat in the emergency room at Hershey for about 6 hours. And then the emergency room doctor came in and said, your oncologist is coming in. And at that moment, we kind of just looked at each other and, had a little more hope that we're like, maybe we're crazy. We're just overthinking this. And I can think back to the moment of when Dr. Comito, who is about 4'10" tall, she's very small, but she's the most intimidating lady I've ever met in my life. And fortunately, she was the oncologist that I saw through the entire first round of treatment. And the very interesting part about this whole story, which we'll get into in a second, but she comes in and she just says, I don't know how to tell you this any other way, but your cancer came back. And she went into it, obviously, that we think it's ALL again, which is a positive, that it's not another type of cancer. And I remember closing my eyes and just like praying and seeing a light and like, this is really going to happen right now. I just put all this work into getting better, and now we're gonna have to deal with it again. And the interesting part about this story is that there was a 5-year difference between the time that my oncologist took 2 weeks in a row of on call in the hospital, and those 5 years apart were the first time I was diagnosed and the time I relapsed. Wow. And then it was the same exact room that I was originally put in was the same exact room that I was put in the second time, and the same exact nurse was my first nurse the same exact time the second time. So it was just like literally deja vu all over again. And we obviously had somewhat of an idea what was going to go on the first time, like to a certain point, I guess they have protocols and things like that. But the second time, obviously, when it came back, we were kind of like, well, what does this mean? I mean, I had some other side effects from the first round of treatment, liver fibrosis that I was getting seen for, and an enlarged spleen and esophageal varices and all these other things that we knew wouldn't really play a factor unless it came back again. And obviously it came back. So it was kind of at that moment trying to figure out, well, what do we do now? And it was a very interesting time. But even through that, I mean, we stayed together. We stayed, motivated through each other and really pushed each other, I think, to stay positive. And really the only people that knew what was going on were the people in that room. And that was the friends and family the family mostly, but even a couple of friends that would come and visit and really kind of got the anchor into what exactly was going on.
And just along with her, she was a rock. Like Brady said, the first time we met her, I mean, it was just like, she is a powerhouse. She's very intimidating, very overwhelming. And just everything was a whirlwind as we're signing papers and everything else. But the thing, the next morning after things had settled, I'll never forget the day that she came in, but she sat down and she just looked at me. She goes, I would have given anything if God would have allowed me just to be a regular pediatrician. And I knew exactly what she meant, because if she was a regular pediatrician, there would be no childhood cancer. And we were so blessed to have someone. I think all of the staff at Hershey just treated us like family, treated Brady like family. They wouldn't have had him do anything. They wouldn't have their own family. And like Brady, I likened to, he had so many side things that were going on. So he actually, the normal protocol would have been for him to get radiation and then the bone marrow transplant. And she absolutely said, I am not going to give you a treatment that's going to kill you. Mm-hmm. So she already basically said, she's not going to risk his life with a protocol and treatment that is, quote unquote, what they normally would do. So, kudos to her again for being brave enough to step outside the box and even look at an alternative treatment for him. And basically at that time he was 14, and we just said to him, okay, this is your decision at this point. And so we just trusted her with everything that we had. And she suggested then doing the bone marrow transplant without the radiation. And so luckily, when the bone marrow transplant came up, like we said, Brady has the two brothers. You're praying that the older one is the one who can do it, because the oldest one is the more stoic. And then you have the little guy, and guess who was the perfect match? Well, it was the little guy. But it still worked out well. But as a mom, you have this fear because you see this little being that still, he felt like he's so humble, but there you had, right. You have Ryan, who's 3 years older, but then you have Sean, who's 4 years younger. So Sean was 10 at the time. And it's odd to me just because like I teach school, so I get to see kids this age a lot. And when I look at little 8-year-olds at school, I think, oh my gosh, Brady was so little when he was diagnosed. And I get to look at 10-year-olds and I think, oh my gosh, he was so little when he did the bone marrow donorship. But, it turned out that his brother was a perfect match. And so we planned for that. And I mean, that's another huge story in itself, because
right.
like
That's a whole other podcast episode. I really want to hear.
Oh my gosh. Well, just even like Brady saying, ironically, how things happen. We ended up, and this is funny too, because like his surgery was on February 2nd, 2011, Groundhog Day. And luckily, I mean, I had spent all the nights with Brady in the hospital. And the thing is, like, their father had driven up with Sean the night before, and there was a freaky ice storm. And so anyway, so they came over, and here Sean was sick as anything. Sean was all stuffy, and Sean had, so not realizing, they were talking about the amount of time that Sean would actually have to be under anesthesia. And not realizing again. So there you have one child waiting to receive the bone marrow, because at that point they have you sign all these papers that if the bone marrow donor decides not to go through with this, that the recipient will die, because basically they clean out your whole system. Which the things that you go through when you're listening, I mean, like Brady said, basically he was living on cancer cells when he was diagnosed. Then they clear that out. So you're basically living on nothing. Then you go back to where you're getting these blood transfusions, that you're living on somebody else's blood, and then like you're going back to the transplant, that they clean Brady's whole entire system out. So if Sean would have been sick, I mean, they would have still had to get the bone marrow aspiration to give to him.
Oh my gosh.
So it was two children.
Two children. My gosh. There. Well, I think we might have to do another date, and maybe we could bring Sean in and then we'll have to get Ryan too. I just want your whole family. But Brady, why don't you tell us, because the trajectory of your life kind of became a passion for childhood cancer. And what is it like to be very close with other families who went through something you went through? I imagine that could be challenging at times, and also very fulfilling and meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. My goal was always to give back in whatever way I possibly could give back. And I had that mindset, I think, probably from the second I was diagnosed. And even when I was younger, I always tried to help other individuals and other kids going through whatever they may be going through. And I can think back, I mean, now I think it's easier now that I'm further out, but it's also harder now that I'm further out to kind of put myself back in some of those shoes. And it took me 16 years to address some of the issues. And this is something that has been more recent, is seeing a psychologist and addressing survivor's guilt and things like that are a lot easier for me to interact with patients and interact with different individuals now that I understand more about why these feelings were surfacing, as far as like, well, why was I selected to survive and this person wasn't, or why is this happen and that happened? But also I always felt of myself and put an extreme amount of pressure on myself to do the next big thing to represent all those who couldn't. And that kind of is underlying too with a lot of the, survivor's guilt, was really understanding, well, where were these feelings coming from? Was it because I necessarily wanted to do it, or was it, because I was trying to fill a void that really couldn't have been filled? But it really was, I think, deep down, I did want to do it because I wanted to do it for, myself, because I really did enjoy helping other people and enjoyed that, but also leading from a different perspective now moving forward. So I think now when I look at it, there's a lot of opportunity to focus on, well, what are those things that we didn't have the opportunity to focus on when we were going through treatment? And my mom and I were even talking about this today, because I have been reflecting a lot with it being Childhood Cancer Awareness Month and things like that, is, well, the laundry list of things that I still have in my system, whether it be, probably never be able to have children in my life because of chemotherapy and all the other stuff. When I was going through treatment the first time, there was a point in time we were walking out of the grocery stores and my ankle bones completely collapsed and I just fell on the ground and had to teach myself how to walk again. And it took me 6 months to learn how to walk again. Or is it, the enlarged spleen again? Is it the, just the liver fibrosis that I went to college at a major institution and wasn't able to drink alcohol? And that's obviously a very minimal thing, but it kind of creates those long-term things that aren't normal for a normal person to look at. And our norm became these things that I think our minds often got skewed to. This is what everybody deals with, or, it's kind of that weird frame shift that it's okay to be upset that we had to deal with this and had to work through this. Did we complain all the time? No, because we were very optimistic and positive, but really addressing the reason I focus a lot on it now is there were no other alternatives at the time. There still are a lot of non-alternatives. So why aren't there a lot of alternatives? And do people really understand that these alternatives could prevent, not just allow the child to survive, but not have as many long-term side effects from the illness? Or, I'm very fortunate. The side effects that I do have are very manageable, and they're, allow me to live a normal life and be healthy for the most part, but there are still some stuff. And I think, that's really the big thing is looking forward now, and it pushes me to want to do more, is really the long-term survivorship, or why are so many kids getting cancer, and why the increased rates continue to increase. Are there situations we can prevent where siblings don't have to deal with as much as they have to deal with, or they truly understand things? And that's really where I focus within my profession, but also my kind of academic interest as far as looking at children's literature and looking at other children's mediums to move forward and allow all individuals to really understand what childhood cancer is and the full picture to what childhood cancer is.
Yeah, I think you can kind of have the misconception, if you're not in the world, that when treatment's over, the cancer's done. And, some people know about, a 5-year remission until you get in remission, but it's long lasting, just as you're saying.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you do in your life that make you happy? What brings you joy? What makes you Brady?
So I'm a big cooker and baker. I cook a lot of interesting things and just kind of love to explore the kitchen. Huge foodie. I play golf. I exercise a lot, probably 6 or 7 times a week. So love to go to the gym, love to run, love to do all these different things, which it's funny that I love to run, and the fact that I probably shouldn't be running, but just I think that's more of a celebration in itself, is having the 2 feet now to walk after there was a time where I just couldn't walk. And now being able to run a half marathon and, all these other things as far as there. But I also am I pride myself on 3 areas. It's faith, family and friends, and education. And I think those are the 3 areas that I really focus and transform my life on, is ensuring that, give all the power and glory to God every single day for getting us to this point. Keep my family and friends, as my rock. My mom and I text every morning. We have a very close relationship as far as that. And then talk to my siblings almost every day as well, and other people like that, and my fiance and other people that, continue to ground me. And then education's huge for me, because I think education for me was always the constant. It kept me going, because that was truly the thing that got me through every second of treatment, is no matter what was happening, if I could keep my schooling going and education going on par with the rest of my class, then I was going to continue to do well within my treatment and things like that, which was very powerful, obviously, to get my bachelor's degree, and now one class till my master's degree. And I think that's really what pushes me to keep going and want to learn more about various areas in life, is kind of the educational component, and living every day like it's your last, and even just soaking in some of the deep breaths of the air is really big for me, and allows me to reallocate a lot of time within lives that could be spent doing something as beautiful as just walking outside for a second or 2 seconds, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's like that gift of perspective that you have, and now you're sharing with so many people. And Lisa, I have one question for you, one final question. I would love to know what Brady and your other kids, Sean and Ryan, who are just as important in this story as Brady, but what your kids have taught you about life and what they've done for you. What gifts have they brought to you?
And as I said, that could take another whole podcast. But
Okay.
I think that the biggest thing is just being with each other. We had a lot of holidays that we spent in the hospital, and a lot of birthdays, and a lot of, like Brady even had said earlier, okay, he couldn't go to a football game because he was sick. And I think that the thing that we learned is it wasn't about the day, and it wasn't about like the presents or anything like that for birthdays. It's just like celebrating every day, being with each other, and just like the love that we share. I mean, we're just so extremely close. And that's the greatest gift, I would say. You know, all of them have just been such an inspiration to me, just to make the most of what they're doing and give their best every day. I look at the three of them, and they're all very unique and different, and they've all just they just bring so much love to the world in what they do. And just such a blessing to be their mom and stand back. And I said, it's just exciting to watch what they've become, but what they continue to become. You know, I said, you always love your kids, but I said, it's also awesome to like your kids. And like, I like my kids, like I love spending time with my kids, and just very blessed that we have the relationships and the bonds that we do. They have so many gifts and talents that they have that they can offer in the world to make a difference. And they each do in their own way. And so, like I said, just the positiveness, learning to live every day, you know, take advantage of the beautiful moments and the happy times that we have together. And like Brady said, stopping and looking at the sun, don't get caught up in that busyness. And because your life changes on a dime. You know, we've seen that twice now, you know, that your life can change instantaneously. And you know, the one thing I would say, you know, even though Brady was going through what Brady went through, I often said, when I realized about with the three kids, though, none of us are guaranteed any more or less time on this earth. We all have now, and that's what we have. You have no idea what will happen to you. So, you know, I think always to leave on a positive note, always say I love you. Don't ever leave each other mad. Don't ever leave each other. And that doesn't happen very much, but I mean, just like make sure you say I love you, make sure you hug each other goodbye.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. That should be a t-shirt. We don't know how much time we're promised, but we do have now. And that's so cool. Well, Brady and Lisa, I can't thank you enough for coming and talking about this. I know it's not easy, and I know it wasn't easy to sit down and think about what we may chat about today. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your story. And I know that so many people are going to resonate with many of the things that you said or learn something new. So thank you so much. If our listeners want to follow along with you, if you have a blog or social media.
Yeah, so they can follow me on Twitter at Brady Lou, so BradyLuu. I'm on Facebook, Brady Lucas, on Instagram, Brady Lou as well. And then on LinkedIn, Brady Christopher Lucas, you can follow. Would love to talk to anybody about the journey and connect further, because I think we're in a community together, especially the childhood cancer community, where we are working together for a cure, but also using the word cure in a light way and allowing all individuals to survive and thrive, and really the individuals too that unfortunately do not make it through their battles, to ensure that their legacies are kept alive throughout the entire process and throughout the entire lives of all of us.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for listening to Lisa and Brady today. I know you're just as amazed by them as I am. And I swear I'm going to have them back on this podcast, because as you got to hear, the whole family is affected by their experience. And I would love to be able to share what they've gone through if they want to. to help you all feel less alone and know that this is a whole family experience. It's not just the child that is diagnosed. So, guys, thanks so much for being here, and I can't wait to see you for a very special surprise episode tomorrow, and it has a little something to do with Brady too. All right, bye guys. Thank you for listening to the Child Life On Call podcast. I'm your host, Katie Taylor, and you can follow us at Child Life On Call on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please rate and review to make it easier for other families to find us. We have cute merch available at www.bonfire.com/store/childlifeoncall, and you can listen to more episodes and find resources at childlifepodcast.com.